Hi, welcome to the 5th tutorial on Sawyer. In this tutorial, I'll be talking to you about network configuration and robot communication. Once you're done with this tutorial, you should be first able to you should be able to ping the robot controller's hostname and also the computer's hostname or IP. The second, you should be able to communicate with the robot and start sending commands. To check if this is working, you can type in ROS topic list and then find all the robot topics that are being published. So let's start with the tutorial. In the last tutorial, we finished creating a workspace and installing Intera Robot SDK. This tutorial will continue on from that point of the workstation setup installation guide. If you can't remember how to get to the installation guide, you can just look at the first few minutes of the previous tutorial. There are two things to know before starting this tutorial. The first is if you're using the computer that's already been configured for Sawyer, then you can skip this tutorial. The second is to use the Ethernet port outside the controller and not the one inside, as shown in the picture in the installation guide. There are quite a few different network configurations that can be used. You can see this by clicking on this link. Before talking about the different configurations, you need to make sure that the robot is in SDK mode. Switching between Intera and Intera SDK is talked about in the Switching between Intera and Intera SDK tutorial. Or you can use the instruction link given in the web page. This is just below the Sawyer SDK picture. Once you've made sure that the robot is in SDK mode, you can then read about some basic requirements and also read about how this robot manages network addresses and host names. The next part talks about ROS naming conventions that is supported by Intera. Depending on the setup, different configurations might need to be used. In this tutorial, I would be using the ROS hostname.local naming convention. The configuration that will be used is the recommended one, which is connecting the workstation and the robot to a router. For the connection, 2 Ethernet cables are required and a router is required. While connecting, make sure not to connect the Ethernet cable into the WAN port in the router. After doing this, ping the robot's hostname with the .local in the end. If this works, the network is working properly. The hostname can be found behind the controller or on Sawyer's table. For the workstation, find its IP by using ifconfig in the terminal and ping the IP to check if the network is working. You could also ping its hostname to check if the network is working. If you don't know how to find the IP, I'll be showing it to you in a couple of minutes in this video. The rest of the web page talks about different configurations. Therefore, let's go back to the workstation setup. Returning to the setup, the first thing to do is to copy the intera.sh file to your workspace. A reminder, if you changed your workspace name, then you would need to change it in the terminal. Next is to open this file and then fill in the appropriate sections. The first thing to fill is the robot's hostname, then the workstation's hostname or its IP. In my case, I've used the hostname as this doesn't change. To find out the hostname, it's quite easy. You just need to type in hostname in the terminal and it should show you the computer's hostname. To find the IP, type in ifconfig in the terminal. The IP normally begins with 192.168, although here I get 10.3.203. That's because I'm not connected to any router. If you are connected to a router, then the IP should begin with 192.168. Find your IP and then copy and paste it into the intera.sh file. The last part is to specify the correct version of ROS. In this case, or in my case, it's Kinetic. To find your ROS version, you can go into the terminal and start up ROS core. Once you do that, you can find the version under parameters. It will be named as ROS distro rather than ROS version. After specifying the correct version, save and close the file and then go to the terminal. In the terminal, type /intera.sh to initialize the SDK environment. Before doing this, try this command. If you check the master_URI, it says localhost 11311. This is actually not correct. It should actually be the robot controller's host name. So now try /intera.sh and then the previous command. Remember to change the directory to your workspace. Now you should see that the master URI has changed to the robot controller's hostname. After this, try ROS topic list. It should show all the topics being published. In mine it doesn't show them at the moment as I'm not actually connected to the robot. But you should get these topics if you are connected to the robot. The next tutorial will be on RViz and how to jog the robot.